everyone. You're listening to Fear-Free Passive Investing, where it's all about passive commercial real estate investing and the fears that new investors have when learning about it. We interview past newbie investors and experts about their experiences, as well as give you tips on navigating different investing strategies. We believe the best things in life are on the other side of fear. So let's face those fears and jump right in. Here's your host, Lucas Miller.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Fear-Free Passive Investing. This is Lucas Miller again. Welcome back to another year, 2021. It's had a rough start, a little bit of a rocky start, but here's hoping that things are going to get better for everyone in 2021. And I thought, what better way to kind of ring in the new year talking about commercial real estate, of course, and maybe the top 5 things passive investors need to know going into 2021. Commercial real estate has definitely seen a huge impact via 2020, and the impact has been good for some sectors and been very bad for others. And I think for multifamily, which is primarily what we focus on in this show, multifamily has had a wonderful run up in 2020. It was rocky around last year, around March and April, but really showed to be a really resilient asset class finishing out 2020. So I obviously people have seen that and they figured, I would like to have a part of that. And so there's a lot of new passive investors coming into the multifamily sector on the limited partner side or the passive investor side. And so I thought it would be a great show to talk about the top 5 things that passive investors should know going into this year, and what you should focus your time and energy on instead of worrying about, any number of things that could happen. So before we get into today's show, I just want to say thank you again to everyone listening. If this is your first show, welcome. We talk about commercial real estate. I help busy professionals navigate the world of passive commercial real estate investing. I help you focus on the things you should be focusing on so you can have your free time to do with it as you see fit. You're a busy professional. You don't need to waste time doing stuff like this. So we keep our episodes short. We get them right to the point. If you have questions, if you have direct questions, you can always email me, fearfreepassive@gmail.com, or you can just go to fearfreepassive.com and find a way to connect there. If you're interested in passive investing alongside me in some of the deals that I do, head on over to fearfreepassive.com, and on the top right, you'll see Invest with Us. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started and talk about the number 5. These are in no particular order, but we'll go in descending order. This is probably pretty obvious, but COVID is still impacting properties. Obviously, we have the virus, and whether you believe that it is overblown, whether you believe it's still a serious threat, I'm not here to debate that. I'm not here to take sides. All I'm saying is that it still is impacting multifamily properties, both in eviction moratoriums. We have directives from the CDC, and with a new administration coming in, I don't see any sort of landlord-friendly legislation coming out of that. So I would expect a lot of that to continue. I would expect actually more tenant-friendly legislation to come out of this administration, but that's another show down the road. But COVID does still impact, and obviously you will still have staffing issues. If one of your staff actually catches the virus, you'll have to worry about that. So payroll expenses are going to be higher. And along with tenants that still could get sick and not be able to pay their rent. So this is still something you need to think about when you're making that investment, and your sponsor should be making this. It should be part of the questioning phase when you're thinking about doing a deal. All right, number 4, 2020 showed us that this sector, and others too, is extremely resilient. I talked about that in my intro, but this is really important to dive in on. It took less of a hit than like motels or short-term rentals or large retails like malls. It came back quicker, and it showed that long-term growth is still very likely. And so what this means as a passive investor is that you will likely see a large amount of deals coming across your desk, if you're tied into the right people, you will see probably a lot of deals happening in 2021. And that's because some people want to cash out their deals, they want to sell them. Others are very bullish, and they think that multifamily is only going to continue to go up for the next couple of years. I would put myself in that category. But yeah, 2020 definitely showed us that this market is resilient. We came back a lot quicker than a lot of other places. So expect the demand to be high and the supply to be high as well right now, supply of deals to invest in. Of course, on my side, on the operator side, the deals are very competitive and supply is very low. So, um, it's tougher for us, but when we do see them as a passive investor, you will see a lot of them. All right, that's a good segue into number three. Buying properties with cash flow is still incredibly important. So even though I do believe that multifamily is going to continue to see a run up and values are going to increase, cap rates are going to compress, I still believe in buying for cash flow. I'm not a fan of speculation at all. I think that's how a lot of people get into trouble. And so we need to make sure these properties are able to float themselves and they're going to be very valuable, meaning that even when rent is not coming in or limited rents, or you're not hitting your projected rents, something happens, you still have cash flow, you still have reserves, you still have a large chunk of money to be able to pay that debt service, pay your investors, pay your contractors, pay all these things, that is going to keep the property in your name without having to foreclose. So cash flow is incredibly important in these deals. I've done several shows about this, so this shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But if you're new, you can go back and listen to those shows. Why I believe cash flow is critical to making these properties work. Um, and part of that is low break-even rent and occupancy numbers. And by break-even, again, I've gone over this a bunch, but if you don't know, break-even rent is where you can charge a rent, and that's the lowest amount you can make before you start losing money. And the break-even occupancy is the same thing. At 100% rent, what's the lowest occupancy you can get? Those are critical when looking at deals. As a passive investor, that should raise a huge red flags. If those are over like 70, 75, 80%, somewhere around there, you want to see them closer to like 60 to 70, maybe 75%. Of course, every deal is different, so take that with a grain of salt, but in general, that's something to look out for. All right, number two, and this is probably more me than anything. I always like to over, well, I like to overthink things sometimes. And so I'm planning as if another lockdown or a pandemic is coming in our hold periods. I think this is my philosophy personally, but I believe that once we have crossed this line of the government can shut down businesses, the government can do whatever they choose in the name of safety, I think that is only going to happen more often. I don't think there's any putting the toothpaste back in the bottle. I don't think this is going away anytime soon. So I think it's prudent to plan as if another lockdown or another pandemic is coming. So yeah, I mean, the power we have given our politicians is staggering. I really don't expect that to go away. I don't think we will have a normal reaction to things ever again. So I think as a passive investor, you need to make sure your sponsor is practicing political underwriting as well. I've talked about this for years, way before COVID. I mean, I'm talking 4 or 5 years ago, I started talking about this. You need to take into account some sort of variable, even in landlord-friendly states, for bad legislation to impact your deal. I think a whole lot of sponsors realized this problem when the CDC put out the eviction moratorium, saying you can't evict people for missing rent. That probably halted a lot of deals, and it certainly slowed down at least one of our deals. It's gotten to the point where we can't evict the people we need to get them out because they chose not to pay rent. That's political underwriting, and this time it was eviction moratoriums. Next time it could be something way different, something like rent control. And you better believe that this administration that's coming in is not landlord friendly, at least not from what I've seen. So political underwriting is kind of critical at this point. So and that's a good segue into number five. These are number one. These all kind of blend together, but make sure you're investing with someone who isn't brand new to this in 2021. Having teams of experienced professionals handling your investment makes sense, but now it's pretty critical. I think we've all seen the funny, you know, statements that you could have bought anything and made money over the last few years. That could be true. That could be not true. But you need to ensure that they are good communicators and they'll be there to answer any questions that you have. I think that's something critical. Even when something's going wrong, I really try to over communicate with the investors so that there's no questions left on the table. And this is a space that has attracted a lot of newer folks to it. And, that's great. That's wonderful. But if this isn't your full-time job, I might reconsider investing with them. Now I have friends that do this and it's not their full-time job and they're very good at it. So take that with a grain of salt. But, when you spend all day, every day doing this, you learn a lot more and a lot quicker. And so I think it's pretty critical. But those are my top five things that passive investors should really think about before going into 2021, or I guess we're in 2021 now, technically. So, it's something to think about as you start seeing some of these deals come out. I've seen several already. And so definitely think about some of these things before you make that investment. But as always, if I can answer any of your questions, send them to fearfreepassive@gmail.com. Or if you just want to invest alongside with me, go to fearfreepassive.com, hit the invest with us in the top right-hand corner. And definitely we'll be in touch shortly. Looking forward to doing a lot more podcasting this year. It's something that has always kind of been fun for me, and I'm actually making time and outsourcing things to make it more of a priority this year. So hopefully that will result in a lot more. And if this is your first show and you don't even know me, but my family and I recently moved. We're on the East Coast now in Northern Virginia. And so that's exciting for us. But what that means for our investors and our listeners, we're a lot more stable now. So we should have a pretty regular schedule now. But if I can do anything for you, please let me know. And I will talk to you next week. Thanks, everyone.